She sat next to me like she belonged there. The first time I saw her, the clouds were pressing low over the chapel roof, and the bell had just finished its slow, mournful toll. Her name was Amelia, the new girl. The girl who asked to sit next to me in literature. Her voice like it had been dipped in honey. She wore her uniform like a second skin, perfectly fitted, perfectly unbothered. I was used to being invisible, Ethan, the scholarship kid who always knew the answer but never said it loud enough. But that day she turned and smiled at me like I was someone worth noticing. And I fell for it. We started talking between classes. She liked Wuthering Heights. She said I was different. You listen like no one else does, she told me once, under the ancient oak tree in the courtyard. And like a fool I believed her. It started small. She asked me to cover for her when she skipped detention. Then she used my login to access restricted records in the library archives. Just for a project, she smiled. I ignored the warning signs. I told myself she needed me. But one rainy evening, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway, laughing. Of course he'll do it. He worships the ground I walk on. That night I didn't sleep. The wind knocked branches against the dorm windows like they were trying to warn me. Or maybe wake me up. By morning I knew. She wasn't lost. She wasn't kind. She was using me. And I had let her. But not anymore. She called me sweet, but hid a knife behind her back. After that night, everything she said felt different. When she leaned over in class, whispering answers like we were partners in crime, I remembered her voice on the phone. When she smiled at me in the courtyard, I saw the twist in her lips. Practiced, not real. Still I played along. I needed time. Ethan, she said, one afternoon while slipping a folded paper into my hand, you're the only one I trust. Inside was a list of names. Students. Faculty. Times. Places. It looked like a schedule but one that made no sense. You're helping me, she added, not asking, just deciding. Like I belonged to her. But I started my own notes that night. I wrote everything down. What she said. What she didn't say. The way she always looked behind her before speaking. The way she always knew too much. I followed the clues like the books I used to read under my duvet with a flashlight. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. And Amelia wasn't the misunderstood heroine. She was something else entirely. I found an old record in the staff archives. A disciplinary case. Covered up. One of the names on her paper was in it. The same date she asked me to deliver a letter by accident to that teacher's office. It was all connected. She was weaving a web and I was supposed to be the thread. But I was starting to pull myself out. The next time she reached for my hand in front of the others, I smiled. But in my pocket was her letter, unopened. Unsent. If she wanted to play games, I played too. But this time I wasn't playing to win her heart. I was playing to end her story. She told me she was the victim. But she had written the script herself. I visited the old campus records room. No one went there anymore. Dust covered everything. But the silence made it easier to think. Her name wasn't in the files. Not once. No awards. No club photos. No disciplinary warnings. It was like Amelia had appeared out of nowhere. But then, one name kept repeating. Lena Rowe. Same birthday. Same handwriting on an old detention slip. Same face in a faded ID photo with a different name. Amelia was Lena. Why change her name? That night, I confronted her. We sat in the courtyard, just like we used to. She smiled at me like always. But this time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. You found it, didn't you? She said softly. Lena Rowe. I killed her. Metaphorically. What did you do, Amelia? I asked. She shrugged. I survived. Then she leaned forward. Her voice dropped. Ethan, you don't understand what it's like to have everything taken from you. And then handed a script where you're only allowed to be silent. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I'd also read Lena Rowe's old messages, buried in the system. Lena wasn't the victim. She had started the fire. Literally. It had been ruled an accident, but too many things didn't line up. And now, Amelia was repeating the cycle. Rewriting roles, recasting people, controlling every scene. And me? She wanted me as her loyal co-star. But I was already changing the ending. I said goodnight. I smiled like always. I let her think I was still hers. But back in my room, I sent a file to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Lena's older sister. Let Amelia keep directing her little drama. The real story was just beginning. Beneath the surface, the morning air in Yorkshire was brisk, and Evelyn stood silently at her late father's grave, the stone still fresh with chiseled letters. Though the soil had settled, her grief hadn't. She traced the name James Holloway with her fingertips, trying to remember him without bitterness. But her thoughts were shattered by footsteps. Evelyn. She turned. It was Andrew Cartwright, her father's former business partner, a man of wealth, charm, and secrets. I didn't expect you, she said coldly. I owe your father a great deal. I came to pay my respects. You owe him. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Or did you owe him something else before he died? Andrew's face stiffened. Let's not play games. I know you're digging, Evelyn. Just be careful. Some truths don't want to be found. He walked away before she could respond, leaving a chill deeper than the wind behind him. Later that day, Evelyn visited the archives in Leeds, determined to find out why her father's will had been rewritten 3 months before his death. The solicitor had assured her everything was in order, but now she knew better. Someone had manipulated the documents. In the dusty records room, she found a scanned letter, one her father had written but never posted. If anything happens to me, do not trust Andrew. He's not the man he pretends to be. I've made arrangements to protect what matters. The ink faded at the bottom. The rest had been torn off. That night, Evelyn returned to Holloway Manor and unlocked the hidden compartment behind her father's old globe. Inside was a sealed envelope with only one word, Grace. She hadn't heard that name in years. Not since her mother disappeared. The name she never spoke. Evelyn sat alone in the drawing room of Holloway Manor, the envelope clutched in her trembling hands. Grace. The name echoed through her mind like a forgotten melody. Her mother had vanished when Evelyn was only 6. The story she'd been told was simple. Grace Holloway ran off with another man, unable to handle the pressures of a wealthy estate and a complicated marriage. But her father had never spoken of it. Not once. He'd simply erased Grace from their lives, as though she had never existed. Evelyn tore open the envelope. Inside was a faded photograph of her mother holding a newborn baby, and not Evelyn. This child was smaller, paler, wrapped in a wool blanket stitched with unfamiliar initials, J.H. On the back of the photo were scrawled words in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Protect him. No one must know. Him. The air in the room grew heavier. Evelyn sat back, her mind racing. She had a brother. A hidden brother. That night, she drove back to Leeds and visited the old registrar's office, pretending to be a historian researching Yorkshire family lines. After hours of digging through fragile documents and half-scanned birth records, she found it. James Holloway Jr. Born, March 2, 2008. Mother, Grace Holloway. Father, not listed. But there was more. Beneath the birth certificate was a closed adoption notice dated 1 month later. The child had been given to a family under strict confidentiality orders, signed by Andrew Cartwright. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Why would Andrew hide her brother? What power did he gain from keeping this child secret? Was this why her father changed his will? As she left the building, her phone buzzed with an anonymous message. Stop asking questions, Evelyn, before you lose what little you have left. She looked around, no one in sight. But she felt eyes on her. Watching. Waiting. And now she knew for certain. Her mother hadn't run away. She was silenced. The secret beneath the church. Evelyn's heels echoed across the cracked stone path of St. Aldwyn's Church, the only place left her mother had ever been traced to after her sudden disappearance. The air around the churchyard felt still, too still, as if the graves were holding their breath. She entered the church, now abandoned and forgotten. Dust swirled in the sunlight, slashing through broken stained glass. She had followed the name James Holloway Jr. to this place. This was where the adoption papers led. A foster family, known to the clergy, had taken in the child under heavy pressure from the Cartwright family. At the back of the chapel, she found a hidden staircase beneath a rotten trapdoor. It creaked open with a groan that sounded too human. She descended slowly, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. The room below was small and damp. Old wooden crates, papers, and broken filing cabinets littered the floor. And in the far corner something unexpected. An iron cradle empty, covered in cobwebs. Carved into the cradle's side. For James, may your name never be forgotten. Among the papers scattered across the floor, one envelope stood out. It was sealed with the Holloway family crest. Inside, a letter in her mother's handwriting. To my daughter Evelyn. If you are reading this, then you've found the truth I was forced to hide. Your father made a choice to protect us both, but Andrew turned that choice into a weapon. James is alive, but he's in danger. Cartwright swore he'd never let our bloodline divide his empire. He made me disappear. He took my child. Find your brother, Evelyn. Find him before Cartwright finds you. Evelyn collapsed to her knees, gripping the letter. She could feel her mother in the words, her voice, her warmth, her desperation. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about justice. As she climbed the stairs back into the church, Evelyn's phone buzzed again. A new message. You're too close now. One more step and I'll bury the past, with you in it. Evelyn didn't flinch. For the first time she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. A ghost in the garden. The sun was setting over Hampshire as Evelyn pulled into the long-abandoned Holloway estate. Once a jewel of old-money prestige, the mansion was now cloaked in ivy and silence. She had followed the last clue from the church, an old deed left in the envelope, leading her to the only place James could have been raised in secret. The iron gate creaked as she stepped into the overgrown garden. The statues were crumbling. The roses, once manicured with obsessive precision, had grown wild. But something about the place felt watched. Inside the house, everything was frozen in time. Dust covered every surface, but nothing had been looted. As if the house was being preserved for someone's return. She wandered into a study, where portraits lined the walls. Most were nameless, but one caught her eye. A boy about 10 years old with her mother's eyes. A brass plate below read, James Holloway Jr. 2009. So he had lived here. And then a noise. A soft rustle just outside the window. Evelyn dashed out into the garden, following the sound until she reached a marble bench covered in moss. A boy's initials were carved there. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind a tree. A man mid-20s, tall, dark hair, cautious eyes. He stared at Evelyn like he'd seen a ghost. You're her, he said, voice low and stunned. You look just like her. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. James. He nodded slowly. They told me you were dead. I thought you were, she whispered, stepping closer. They told me nothing. They took you. They took everything. James looked down, conflicted. I don't know who to believe anymore. The Cartwrights paid my foster family for silence. I was raised like a secret no one wanted. But I want you, Evelyn said, tears brimming. You're my brother. Before they could say more, headlights flared in the distance. James turned sharply. You shouldn't have come here. Why? Evelyn asked, alarm rising. Because if you found me, he did too. Behind them, a dark SUV rolled up the hill, windows blacked out. And Evelyn realized they weren't alone anymore. Truth behind tinted glass. The SUV rolled to a stop. Its engine hummed with an expensive quietness that screamed danger. Evelyn instinctively stepped in front of James, shielding him. He didn't protest, he looked just as terrified. The door opened slowly, and out stepped a man in his late 50s. Impeccably dressed, with a silver-tipped cane and a face she'd only seen in newspaper clippings and courtroom sketches. Edmund Cartwright. Evelyn's heart raced. This was the man who'd manipulated her father, ruined her mother, and buried her brother in lies. Quite the reunion, Edmund said coolly, eyeing them like an art critic admiring a rare piece. Didn't think you'd dig this deep, Evelyn. I underestimated you. You buried your sins under our family name, she spat. And you tried to erase us. Edmund chuckled. Erase? No. I repurposed. Your mother was unstable, your father too emotional. But you're sharp. Dangerous even. James stepped forward. Why lie to me? Why hide who I was? Edmund's tone darkened. Because you were leverage. Your very existence threatened the balance. I needed silence, and your price was cheap. Evelyn's fists clenched. You exploited children like pawns in your empire. And yet here you are, Edmund said, unfazed. Foolish enough to walk into the lion's den. You think this ends with a reunion and a happy photo? You're right, Evelyn said, voice steady. This ends with exposure. She pulled out her phone, showing the red blinking light. Every word he'd spoken had been recorded and streamed live. Edmund's face flickered with the first sign of panic. What have you done? Prepared, Evelyn said. I knew you'd come. You always tie up your messes personally. Sirens wailed in the distance. The Cartwrights hadn't anticipated her becoming the hunter. Edmund's men drew closer, but James stepped beside Evelyn, lifting a flash drive. Years of documents, he said. Everything you buried. Your empire dies tonight. As blue lights filled the garden and police flooded the estate, Evelyn and James stood shoulder to shoulder. For the first time in years, the truth had a voice, and it refused to be silenced. Ashes of the empire. The Cartwright estate was no longer silent. Blue and red lights washed over its grand gates. Officers moved swiftly, seizing files, computers, hard drives. Anything that could support the weight of the story Evelyn had just detonated. Inside the mansion, Edmund Cartwright sat cuffed to a mahogany chair. His empire, built on blackmail, bribery, and betrayal, was crumbling around him. Evelyn stood in the very room where her mother had once been silenced, where her father had begged for truth. Now it was she who spoke. You orchestrated a lie so deep even your own blood forgot who they were, she said, staring Edmund down. But you forgot one thing. Edmund raised an eyebrow, defeated but still clinging to pride. And what's that? Memories resurface. And truth doesn't stay buried forever. Across the room, James handed over the last piece of evidence to the chief investigator. It was a family ledger, pages filled with coded transactions, names, and signatures. Most damning of all, a letter signed by Edmund, ordering the silencing of Evelyn's brother. James looked at her, eyes full of sorrow and strength. I should have known sooner, he whispered. I'm sorry. Evelyn shook her head. You were a victim too. He used all of us. Suddenly a scream echoed from upstairs. One of Edmund's guards had tried to flee, but was quickly subdued. It was chaos, controlled righteous chaos. Outside, reporters swarmed the gates. News vans lined the road. The Cartwright name, once a symbol of untouchable power, was now headline fuel. As Edmund was escorted away, he turned to Evelyn one last time. You think this brings closure? It won't. Power always finds a way back. She stepped closer, her voice calm but deadly. Then I'll be here. Every time it tries. The doors slammed behind him. James stood next to her, uncertain. What now? Evelyn looked out at the sunrise creeping over the estate, once her family's prison. Now we rebuild. From the ashes. The legacy I chose. 6 months later, the Cartwright estate was no longer a fortress of secrets. The once menacing gates now opened to a quiet community center. Evelyn's vision. What was once used to hide injustice had become a place to heal from it. Children's laughter echoed through the halls. Survivors of corruption and coercion came here to reclaim their voices. The place breathed new life, new hope. Evelyn stood at the front of the crowd, preparing to give her first public speech since the downfall of her grandfather. James sat in the front row, supportive as ever. No longer her shadow, but her equal. As the cameras rolled and the world listened, she took a breath. My name is Evelyn Cartwright, she began. But the name doesn't define me. The truth does. A hush fell over the room. For years I believed in a lie, crafted by someone who valued power over love, legacy over humanity. But I stand here not as the product of a dynasty, but as a survivor of it. And today I choose to build something different. Applause erupted, some standing, some wiping tears. After the speech, James joined her outside beneath the same willow tree where she once mourned her past. Now she stood tall, the wind no longer haunting her. You did it, he said softly. No, Evelyn replied, we did. A young girl from the crowd ran up to her, clutching a small sketch pad. Miss Evelyn, I drew this. It's the center with wings. Like it's flying. Evelyn knelt down, tears in her eyes. It's beautiful. Just like your future. The girl smiled and ran back to her parents. As dusk painted the sky in golden hues, Evelyn looked out at the place she once feared and now called hers. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer ruled her. She had taken her pain, her story, and rewritten it on her terms. Not for revenge. For legacy. One built on truth.